everyone. My name is Trish Sokolowski, and I am the manager of the Faculty of Graduate Studies. I'd like to welcome our competitors, friends, families, the supervisors, judges, and spectators to the 3-Minute Thesis Competition. This year is the 16th annual Research and Innovation Week, and our title this year is Our Changing World, which is really an appropriate theme for, I think, this coming year. The 3-Minute Thesis is a communication exercise, and it provides an opportunity to graduate students to communicate their scholarly research and creativity. It challenges graduate students to present their research in just 180 seconds in an engaging form that can be understood by an audience with no background in research area. The Faculty of Graduate Studies was thrilled to announce that Jessica Ellingham, PhD candidate in Chemistry and Material Science, won the second place in the provincial 2020 3MT competition. This is the first time Lakehead University has placed in the top 10 finish. Jessica is now competing in the national competition, and we all wish her the best of luck. A few housekeeping items. Please remember that this is a live event. Please do not use the chat functions during the presentation. This will not be a Q&A opportunity within this event. So please, again, do not use the chat function. Once all presentations are finished, there will be a 15-minute break. Please ensure you come back promptly at 5:55 to hear the winners announced. I would like to take this time to introduce our judges. Dr. Rhonda Dubek, Coordinator of Instructional Development, Teaching Commons, and Department of Languages. Dr. Chandra Shahi, Faculty of Graduate Studies Dean. And Dr. Bhatia Stoller, Associate Vice President, Research and Graduate Studies, and Associate Professor, Department of English. We are now going to start the live presentations. Our first presenter is Shaida Aidid. Supervisors are Dr. Charles Lefko and Dr. Lindsay Galloway. And the title is Divestment and Beyond, Perspectives from the Fossil Fuel Divestment Movement.
Extreme weather changes, climate refugees, food insecurity, and the spread of vector-borne disease. We are witnessing the disruption of our planet's natural systems, and it's having a direct impact on global health. Evidence has shown that burning fossil fuels is the #1 driver of carbon emissions, which contributes to land degradation, pollution, and a warming planet. What's needed is a just transition, one that puts the era of fossil fuels behind us. The fossil fuel divestment movement has helped facilitate this transition by stigmatizing fossil fuels and cutting off their financial support. It's a movement rooted in climate justice, a framework that addresses the history of land domination, capitalism, and the uneven distribution of environmental burdens. Because student-led activism has been instrumental in popularizing this movement, my research studies successful divestment campaigns at Canadian universities. Using a multiple case study design, I interview key organizers and analyze campaign documents to explore just how students use climate justice from theory to practice. In Canada, studies have shown that divestment campaigns educate settler students about the past and present colonialism of Indigenous land. Organizers also have the opportunity to create alliances with affected communities and grow coalitions with justice-seeking groups. However, divestment campaigns are rarely carried out by frontline communities, and their voices are sometimes missing from the narrative. Campaigns also lack diversity despite the intersectional nature of their cause. Thus, divestment can be perceived as a tactic of the privileged, which can contribute to misunderstandings of the principles of climate justice. Embedding these principles from the ground up by emphasizing the rights of human and planetary health, recognizing the root causes of climate injustice, and engaging in inclusive participation practices can strengthen the movement's call to action. My research documents how activists navigate the challenges of community organizing and how they prevent replicating the power structures they are fighting. In the midst of multiple crises of a global pandemic, systemic racism, the widening wealth gap, we need to understand that these issues are interconnected and intensified by climate change. Collective action that engages in anti-oppressive practices is needed now more than ever. On this slide is an article of my fellow campaigners who recently got Lakehead to divest. As a scholar and an activist, I'm committed to make research that is valuable to youth fighting to make a just transition possible. Divestment has helped students recognize climate justice, but there's still room to move it beyond theory and into practice. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Shadaya. And our next presenter is Tristan Brown, Supervisor Ahmed El-Asher. Title of the research is Wind-Induced Pounding of Tall Buildings in Proximity.
Have you ever decided to go out on an adventurous walk into a beautiful wilderness forest and look up into the sky and see the tall, slender trees slowly waving and hearing the tree branches bristle ever so slightly against its surrounding trees? It's beautiful. If you look up to the top left picture of my slide, this is what I picture when I describe this. Aside from this, however, how many of you in the audience know the number of buildings in the world that are considered tall? Well, the answer to that is kind of unknown, but to put a number into perspective, there is over 170 buildings in the US alone that are taller than 700 feet in height. So going back to that initial topic of tall, slender trees subject to wind, well, what if you consider those tall, slender trees to be tall, slender buildings? As a civil engineer specializing in wind attacking tall structures, from my understanding, this is considered tragedy. On the figure to the top right, this is a photo of downtown New York, one of the biggest, most densely populated areas in the world. When designing, every calculation is crucial. Wind will become one of the leading calculations required when designing and engineering one of these many skyscrapers shown in this figure. See, when powerful winds are subject to a singular standing structure directionally proportionate to the wall, well, many calculations are required to determine the wind applied. However, when there's hundreds of buildings surrounding that specific structure, these calculations start becoming increasingly difficult to analyze. This is because of the term called wind tunneling effect. To understand this term, consider water coming out of a hose. When you decide to put your thumb over the end of the water, where the water is exiting, or the tube, the water will eventually build up pressure in that hose, causing water to exit at a greater speed. Therefore, when a large amount of wind enters a dense metropolitan location, the amount of area that wind can go through becomes drastically smaller, leading to an area with large wind pressures. This will cause strong pressures applied to that structure being examined. If these calculations or analyzing tests are not properly measured, additionally with the structures being too close into proximity to the other buildings, having the right amount of wind pressure applied to that structure will cause that tall, slender structure to laterally deflect, making contact with its neighboring building. That's where my study comes into play. My goal is to prevent that pounding to exist. So in my research, I'll run analytical modeling of neighboring tall structures through software programming to find that required gap distance needed between the structures to prevent such pounding effects. This will also be dependent on the building's shape, size, and its height. Without these tolerable measurements towards adequate gap distance needed, catastrophe will arise. So in my research, when it's put into play, we don't have to worry about the photos on the bottom and can enjoy more photos on the top. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Kristen Shea, Supervisor Dr. Kristen Oinonen. Title of research is Drinking to Remember, a study of alcohol use and memory in a large national sample.
Declining memory is one of the most commonly cited fears about growing older, and that's not surprising. Memories are the foundation of our personal narratives, and they inform our sense of self. Beyond that, we really rely on our memories to organize day-to-day life. This has huge implications for quality of life in older adults. What happens when we start to forget important meetings or forget to take our medication on time? And how can we maximize our memory and maintain healthy, active lives for as long as possible? Could we modify our lifestyles to achieve a better outcome? My research focuses on how alcohol affects memory in older adults. At first, it seems obvious. Alcohol's bad for your memory, isn't it? After all, sometimes people struggle to recall the details from a night out after drinking, and long-term heavy drinking can damage the brain, leading to a form of alcohol-induced dementia for some people. Those things are both true, but research shows that the story is more complicated. Many studies suggest low levels of drinking could have a positive effect on cognition. In order to understand this better, I took a detailed approach in looking at the relationship between alcohol and memory in adults over the age of 45. I received cross-sectional data from the Canadian Longitudinal Study on Aging, a health-based study with over 30,000 participants from across the country. We measured alcohol in as many ways as we could, including the number of drinks we might have in a typical week, how frequently we drink, how often we binge, and how all of that compares to drinking habits earlier in our lives. We then asked how alcohol affects 3 kinds of memory: immediate memory, longer-term memory, and the ability to remember to complete a task in the future. In the end, we found a small positive effect of alcohol on all 3 memory tests, no matter which way we measured alcohol use. There was no real difference between people who only drank a little and people who drank a lot, but alcohol drinkers had consistently better scores than non-drinkers. We saw this effect even after accounting for other potential explanations like age, social life, physical health, and education. Given the many established health consequences of alcohol, this project raises important questions. Is alcohol protecting the brain somehow and improving memory? Or is there another factor associated with abstinence that's actually harmful? Getting to the bottom of this phenomenon has implications for regular people who want to make lifestyle choices to minimize their age-related memory loss. And it also has implications for healthcare infrastructures, public health guidelines, and medical workers who will be treating memory loss in the future as our older adult population continues to grow.
Thank you, Kristen. Our next presenter is Ashley Faulkner, Supervisor Dr. Ingeborg Zebi. Research title, Using the Immune System to Tackle Cancer-Causing Virus.
If you had just been diagnosed with cancer, what is the first thing you'd want to know? For many, the only things needed in that moment would be the comfort in knowing that there are treatment options and support from family and friends. So what if I told you that your only treatment option is to undergo invasive surgery combined with chemotherapy, possibly leading to infection, infertility, or even death? What if I also told you that the stigma surrounding your cancer may make you feel too uncomfortable or embarrassed to seek comfort from your loved ones? Well, unfortunately, this is not a hypothetical situation. This is the reality for over 600,000 people worldwide who've been diagnosed with HPV-related cancers. There's clearly a gap in the standard of care for these patients, and my research seeks to fill that void. Now, let's back up, because what is HPV? Well, HPV, or human papillomavirus, is a sexually transmitted virus, which, believe it or not, 80% of people will be infected with at least once in their life. Of course, not every HPV infection will lead to cancer, but persistent infection with high-risk types of HPV, such as HPV-16, is the major cause of not only cervical cancer, but also an increasing number of head, neck, penile, anal, and oral cancers. Now, the main culprit in HPV cancer development is a small but deadly viral protein known as E6. This protein is only expressed by the virus, and it is then involved in a multitude of cancer-developing processes. I like to picture the E6 protein as a microscopic Swiss Army knife, where each tool is a function that cancer cells need to survive. My goal is to block as many of these functions as I can to totally inactivate this protein, because no more E6 means cancer cell death. So how do I plan on doing this? Well, I am using immunotherapy, more specifically antibodies, to target the E6 protein. However, I'm not necessarily using human antibodies. Let me explain. Both sharks and llamas produce a unique type of antibody that are very small but very specific, almost like a microscopic guided missile. Since llamas are a little easier to catch, our lab has generated a number of llama-derived antibodies that are able to target and bind to the E6 protein. Currently, I'm in the process of evaluating their ability to block the E6 protein and kill cancer cells. I have already identified some very promising antibodies, and when my arsenal is complete, I will be able to specifically target the virus and treat HPV-related cancer. With this project, I believe that we can create a safe and effective treatment option for patients suffering from HPV-related cancers, all thanks to a whole lot of science and llamas, of course. Thank you.
Our next presenter is Wesley Floriano-Willick, Supervisor Zaikan Zhang, Thesis Research Using D2L and Survey Data to Predict Student Performance.
Did you know that Canadian universities experience anywhere between a 73 to 83% persistence rate among first and second year undergraduate students? That means anywhere between 1 in 4 to 1 in 5 students who enter university are unable to complete their degree and drop out within the second year of their study. In today's degree-inflated economy, it is of utmost importance that any student wishing to graduate is able to do so to the best of their ability. It is therefore a moral obligation of universities to ensure they are doing everything in their power to allow these students to graduate on time and to be ready for the workforce ahead of them. It is also a financially wise decision because, as we all know, it is cheaper to retain current customers than it is to attract new ones. Hello, my name is Wesley Willick, and I'm going to talk to you today about linear analytics and a specific subset of this field of research in relation to virtual learning environments, VLEs, and how the data from them can be used to predict student outcomes such as performance and persistence. Predictive models that use VLE data have been in use since early 2007 at Purdue University, and they have achieved a relative degree of success in predicting student performance and allowing universities to intervene with at-risk student populations to increase retention. However, despite the literature on this subject being quite extensive, these models are not easily generalizable across institutions due to the uniqueness of VLE data. Because of that, my project will focus on a two-phase research design, with the first phase consisting of analyzing Lakehead's own virtual learning environment data in an effort to create a predictive model unique to Lakehead University and to Lakehead University's student population. The model will be used to predict student outcomes in an effort to intervene early and to intervene consistently with these students who need interventions to allow them to graduate on time. The increased usage of virtual learning environments and digital learning technologies, especially in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, has also potentially led to negative side effects. We know that the increased usage of information communication technology in workforces has resulted in technology-related stress among workers. However, the subject is not well studied in relation to student populations. As such, the second phase of my study will look at a cross-sectional survey of first-year university students at Lakehead to determine if there's indicators of technology-related stress among the first-year students. And while my research will not be able to link those self-reported stress valuables to the performance data just yet, it will hopefully lay the groundwork for future studies to do just that. Again, the ultimate purpose of this research is to allow Lakehead to be informed about presenting early and ongoing interventions to students to ensure that all students are able to graduate to the best of their ability. Thank you.
Our next presenter is Kaylin Kainalainen. Her supervisor is Dr. Carlos Zerpa, and her thesis research is questioning transfer shock in the post-secondary environment.
I'm one of the nearly 900,000 post-secondary students in Ontario. But despite all of us being students, my peers and I take all sorts of different paths while obtaining an education. More and more, many of us are looking for opportunities to customize that education by attending multiple schools and programs and by achieving combinations of certificates, diplomas, and degrees. This is made possible in part by academic transfer pathways, which are the result of partnerships between different schools. So, for example, I could complete a diploma at a college, take a transfer pathway to a partner university, and then complete a degree in a related field. Currently, there are more than 1,900 of these pathways in Ontario, resulting in more than 800,000 opportunities for transfer. But despite these opportunities, transfer students face a variety of psychosocial, emotional, and academic obstacles when they move from school to school. One concept that's gained a lot of attention is called transfer shock. And this generally refers to the idea that when a student moves from one school to another, their grades tend to decrease. Research has associated transfer shock with things like an inability to adjust to a new environment, a lack of social connection, and even dropping out of school altogether. So it's become a bit of a red flag for students interested in transfer, as well as for faculty and administrators who might wonder if transfer students are capable of academic success. All of a sudden, transfer seems to be a lot more daunting than we might have originally thought. But the interesting thing is that the more I read about transfer shock, the more questions I had. And the more I learned, the less I felt I really understood it. It turns out that the research in this area is just full of discrepancies, debates, and conflicting evidence. For example, even though it's called transfer shock, it doesn't necessarily only affect transfer students. Also, there are programs where your grades are likely to increase rather than decrease. And even though some studies suggest that changes in grades reflect some sort of underlying psychosocial turmoil, there's limited evidence to support this. So clearly there's a lot of work to be done in this area. And that's where my research comes in. I want to clarify the nature of transfer shock and the role that it plays in post-secondary education. I want to find out who it affects and why. And I want to challenge the assumption that transfer students are less likely to be successful than their peers. This research can also be used to develop supports and resources that will help students along the way in obtaining their educational goals, and it will contribute to a larger conversation about student mobility and transfer in Ontario. Thank you.
Our next presenter is Rachel Golbinski, Supervisor Dr. Charles Lepko, and a research topic is exploring cooking, culture, and equity in collective cooling spaces, a case study of Roots to Harvest in Thunder Bay, Ontario.
I am a foodie and a humanitarian, so much so that I became a chef working in public health, making nutritious, culturally appropriate food more readily available to Northwestern Ontario families, which you can see in these photos here. Through that work, I learned that food can be a connector, an important part of gathering, celebrating, and sharing traditions. But I also learned that food can be a divider, as is evident in the extreme inequity levels manifesting as lack of regular access to healthy food and loss of traditional foodways. COVID-19 has highlighted the destructiveness of disconnection and loneliness, especially among people already made vulnerable from lived experience with racism, poverty, and food insecurity. Existing research shows that gathering together to make and break bread reduces feelings of social isolation and increases a sense of belonging and connection. My research explores these kind of opportunities for social connections by considering the links between cooking, culture, and equity through food-based programming coordinated by community organizations. Examining how these groups can use cooking to support marginalized populations by integrating culture and social justice issues into their programming, I conduct a case study of Roots to Harvest in Thunder Bay, which uses food to connect people through urban agriculture, employment training, and food preparation. I interviewed staff and participants of cooking programs and found connection to be a primary theme. Interviewees included newcomers to Canada, Indigenous youth, and adults working toward a high school diploma. They described a close-knit atmosphere with their peers where they learned about themselves, their culture, and those of others within the space. One person said, "They see me as I am. I get to be me and I can breathe." Facilitators work to intentionally build relationships, create safe, inclusive spaces, and offer wraparound supports to program participants. Though most attendees have experienced sustained exposure to the inequities mentioned before, they didn't discuss social justice issues specifically in the programs. My conclusions suggest there is room to do more education and advocacy work within these cooking programs, allowing participants to use food as a platform to learn and engage with society. This research contributes to debates in food studies literature about the ways that community food programming can have a greater impact on social isolation. Additionally, it will benefit the theory and practice of other organizations, both in Thunder Bay and beyond, offering collective cooking programs interested in supporting equity and intercultural learning.
Thank you, Rachel. Our next presenter is Nobin Kumar Roy, Supervisor Dr. Farhan Abdul Ghaffar. Research topic, a movable eyeball for fixed 5G heads.
Hi, the future is all about 5G and connected devices. And to have a smart life, we need to have a smart devices. As you can see in the problem statement, the cell phone tower is radiating energy, or you can say signal, continuously around it, whether you need it or not, which I truly believe is a waste of energy. And to correlate that, you can see the picture of a man who is holding his phone and looking very much frustrated because his cell phone is using energy continuously, whether that man is using the phone or not. And to solve this problem, we have come up with our antenna design. And this antenna, I truly believe, can be used in future 5G antennas, which will be used in the future cell phone towers. And the main advantage of that tower will be, like you can see that, it will only give signal or energy to a device which is connected to it. And the devices could be anything. It could be a connected car, it could be a cell phone, or it could be a house. Like it could be any device. And the best part of is it like when it is connected to a particular device, and when the device is moving, the signal will also move along with this particular device. For example, a connected car, an electric car, when the signal is connected to the electric car, and as the car moves, the signal will also move along with the car like a smart device. And in this way, we will save a lot of energy. And to further explain this, you can correlate this with the human eye. Like if you are looking at a very far object and whenever your eye is fixed in the object, and when the object moves, your eyeball also moves with the object, but your head is fixed exactly like the 5G antenna. The antenna is fixed, but the signal is moving with the object. And to correlate that, you can see the picture of a man who is holding his phone and is looking very happy because he knows that he is saving a lot of energy because his phone is only using energy when he is using the phone. And in this way, I truly believe the future mobile tower will save a lot of energy as compared to the current one. And by this, I will say that the world is changing, so should be the changes, so should be the requirements, so should be the devices to adopt the changes. Thank you. Thank you.
Our next presenter is Taha Sadghi, Professor Dr. Leila Hazkad. Research topic, drug delivery to the human respiratory tract.
How many people are suffering from respiratory diseases annually all around the world? 1,000, 10,000? No. According to World Health Organization, asthma and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease have taken their toll on millions of human health by making the airways narrower, inflamed, and swell. This is just an estimation, and the number is rising dramatically because of pollution and smoking rate increment. Especially, COVID-19 pandemic had an adverse impact on the patients who are already dealing with respiratory diseases and can trigger asthma and COPD. In order to address this global problem, inhaler devices have been introduced, such as pressure oximeter dose inhaler, dry powder inhaler, and even the newest one, soft mist inhaler, that probably you have seen them in your daily life. All these devices deliver an optimal inhaled drug dose to the target site of action with minimal or no adverse side effect. What matters in inhaler is the amount of drug that can reach to the lungs. My plan is to increase the efficiency of drug delivery mechanism using experimental and numerical approaches. But how can I do that? I will accumulate drug distribution data through human respiratory tract within experimental methods, while with the numerical methods, I can study the effect of changing variables such as geometry of the airways, relative humidity, or flow velocity of inhaler on drug deposition and find the optimal values to localize drug distribution into the lungs. This can be done by assessing the effect of inhaler nozzle position inside the mouthpiece on drug deposition and investigation of the effect of airflow rate acceleration on drug particle size distribution, as well as many other functional ways that I'm going to use in my research to find these values. To put it in a nutshell, numerical approaches can enable us to predict behavior of complex structure in a very time and cost-efficient way. That is what exactly I'm trying to do, simulating a human respiratory tract using a supercomputer and a software called ANSYS Fluent to investigate the effect of the most important variables on drug deposition inside the human body. Having these results, I'm able to validate them with experimental results and then improve the inhaler efficiency, leading to have a significant influence on asthma and COPD diseases attenuation, and also reduce the side effects of inhaler devices to save more human lives. Thank you.
We're now at our last presenter for the evening. I would like to introduce Erin Venezuela, Professor Dr. Sonia Mastrangelo, and research topics, student-teacher relationships and their impact on learning and motivation.
Do you remember you? Not who you are now, but who you were before an educator believed in you and showed you how to believe in yourself? Reflect on that relationship for just a second. These are the questions that educators need to ask themselves as we move through educating students in an ever-changing world. Dr. James Cormer writes, no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. Research in the field of education has been ignited by a push to explore participatory action research, more specifically, exploring student voice and moving away from focusing primarily on teacher perspectives. Student voice studies how students can contribute to their learning by asking for their input to inform, to consult, to involve, and to empower their learning experiences. The emphasis in literature up until recently has been on fostering positive relationships in the early years. However, what's less visible is the importance of fostering these relationships beyond a student's first few years of school. My thesis focuses on the student-teacher relationship and its impact on student learning and motivation, highlighting the voices of 20 students in grades 4 through to 8. The purpose of presenting student voice as the focal point in my thesis allows for experiences to be shared through a social constructivist lens. Vygotsky posits that individuals are active participants in the creation of their own knowledge, and this includes students sharing their experiences to inform and to build new knowledge within the field of education. Participants in my study were initially asked to complete a demographic survey, highlighting the grade that they were in, their definition of what a relationship is, and rating on a scale of 1 through 5 how important they felt the student-teacher relationship was to their learning and motivation. Student experiences were further explored during one-on-one interviews. As you can see from my slide, students were asked to reflect on their school experiences, focusing specifically on their student-teacher relationships. Students were asked to describe their relationships and identify those relationships as whether they were positive or negative. One significant finding was that 10 of the 20 participants interviewed recalled that their grade 4 student-teacher relationships were negative and probably the worst ones that they could remember. Additionally, students commented the older they got, the less they felt they could ask for help when they viewed their student-teacher relationships negatively. These discoveries highlight that transition to upper elementary school is often difficult. Student experiences, both positive and negative, need to be shared in order to understand where these changes can be made. Students interviewed reported that they held knowledge longer and they could seek support when they felt that their relationships with their teacher were positive. Consider now the questions I posed almost 3 minutes ago. Be the educator that listens to students, builds their relationship with them, and believes in them before they believe in themselves, just like someone did for you. Thank you.
That comes the end of our formal presentations. We will now take a break while the judges can deliberate. Please come back, everybody, at 5:55, right on time, and we will then announce the winner. Okay, my phone tells me it is 5:55, so we'll all resume. We welcome everybody back. I'll now pass it on to Dr. Shahi to announce our winners.
Thank you so much, Trish. First of all, I would like to thank everybody who is participating in this event, and my special thanks to the 2 judges who are joining with me, Dr. Rhonda Dubeck and Dr. Batya Stoller. And believe me, when we entered into the deliberation mode, we had our virtual gloves on, boxing gloves, and we were fighting for each one of you. And because, we were not in a room, so thank God we do not have any injuries, but we were desperate to get each one of you the top position. You are such good people. such wonderful presentations, research very well explained. And I still remember my first day of introduction about the 3MT. You have taken care of each and everything. I'm very, very proud of all of you. And again, as I said, that these were very tough decisions to make. We want each one of you to take first prize, but then, there has to be one winner. Of course, there are 3 winners. So I will announce the 3 winners that the judges have finally decided. And again, we discussed each point of your engagement, communication, as well as comprehension. And based on that, the 3rd position, and I'm sure that you will all virtually clap or whatever way you can encourage people. The 3rd position for the 3MT competition this year goes to Shadia Adid. The 2nd position goes to Taha Siddiqui. And our proud winner for this year's 3MT competition, we will all recognize all these on the Thursday event, is Ashley Faulkner. We are again very, very proud of all of you and all the winners. And in case there is a provincial competition, Ashley will make us proud by representing Lakehead University. We do not know because there are deliberations going on because of the COVID situation, and especially because Laurentian University was supposed to host and they have already said no. So we do not know what is happening there, but I am sure that all of you will do wonders whenever you go for communication exercise. And I think you should be teaching communication style. Thank you so much once again, and I'll pass it back to Trish for the final comments.
Congratulations to all of our winners. We're so proud of all of you within the Faculty of Graduate Studies. Ashley, you're going to be invited to speak and do your presentation virtually at the Research and Innovation Week ceremonies, which are on Thursday evening. I want to thank all of the supervisors for their mentorship and support of their graduate students. Without your support and leadership, our students would not be able to be where they are today. Also importantly are our family, friends, and spectators who also came out to support the students. They always need us and they always need you, and so we really thank you for coming out and showing your support. I want to say a special thank you to our TSC staff. This year, more than any, we've relied on our TSC staff and they've been there for us. So thank you to all of you for your support and being with us every step of the way as we guide this virtual Research Week. 2 other people I just want to say a quick thank you to are Bethany Kramer, R&I Week Events Manager, who without her support, we would not have been able to put on this event for us today. Her guidance has been, just so much. So thank you, Bethany. And from the FGS office, Allison Waitley Doucette, again, would not be able to have put on this event without your support. So thank you. For all of those who are looking and wondering, the game code is #3MT. We have our poster sessions tomorrow for graduate students. So again, I invite anybody to come out and watch and take a look at our posters and learn more about the research that's happening within the Faculty of Graduate Studies at Lakehead University. Thank you, and have a good evening, everyone.